Good evening, everybody. A little bit late as we're waiting for the YouTube to catch up with us. But I call you now to order. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to people in the gallery as well. My name is Penny Rivers, and I'm the chair of this committee. And the vice chair can't be with us this evening, so I'm on my own with a space. Please raise your hands if you would like to speak. Please keep your microphones on mute when you are not speaking. Please keep questions brief and to the point. And please, may I remind ward councillors to sit separately from the committee when applications in their ward are being considered and voted on. So agenda number one on the agenda is apologies. Kim.
Thank you. We have apologies from councillors Graham White and councillor Peter Clark, and councillor Andy MacLeod is substituting.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, minutes of the last meeting. Are you happy with those minutes? Thank you. Declarations of interest.
Yeah. That's ours.
Kim, declarations of interest.
None received prior to the meeting.
Thank you. And questions from members of the public? There are none, and there are no questions submitted by members either. So agenda item number 6, relevant updates. Claire, anything to report?
Chair, nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. So we come swiftly to our applications, the first of which is WA 2024-01788, the Bourne Hall, Vicarage Hill, Farnham. This is for the erection of 3 dwellings. Oh, over to you, Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just struggling with my microphone there. So the application is for 3 to demolish the existing community use hall at Bourne Hall and replace it with 3 new houses. Sorry, I'll just turn this on to slideshow. So the site is accessed off Vicarage Hill, just about 100 metres south of the intersection with Frensham Road. Currently, you're last occupied by a dance and theatre school, as indicated on the serial photo. And the site consists of the hall and adjoining land, and it also extends over the private lane, which would give access to 2 of the 3 houses. So I'm just going to see if I can get rid of that. So looking at some photographs of the site, this is a view south along Vicarage Hill. The site is on the left, so you can see glimpses of the building there. Vicarage Hill curving around to the right, and an access lane straight ahead, which gives access to, I believe, 5 houses in addition to well, there's no access at the moment to the application site, but it has direct frontage. So that's a closer view of the building there, part 1 story, part 2 story, and then a view down the access lane. On the north side of the site, there's a building with 5 flats in it. So this is Austin Place. And this view also shows you an existing vehicle access into the site off Vicarage Hill and a pedestrian access adjacent to that. Moving down the site, again adjacent to the boundary with Austin Place, this is a view across the lower part of the site showing the steep profile, and it's a view towards Wellbourne, which abuts the site to the south, and another view of the building in Wellbourne on the right from Frensham Road. This is the layout as proposed. The green outline is the existing building. The grey outline is the three-storey element of the proposed building, and then it has a smaller element just outlined in black towards Austin Place. And so we've got a label there which has popped up off CAD, I think. So elevation drawings here, the top one is facing towards Frensham Road, the bottom one towards Vicarage Hill. So due to the site of the lay of the land, the slope of the land, it's a three-storey elevation towards Frensham Road, but only two-storey towards Vicarage Hill. These are side elevations. The top one is facing north, so that's towards Austin Place. The south elevation at the bottom facing towards property to the south. And some sections here across showing the relationship to, again, to Austin Place and 9 Vicarage Hill on the right there, and the drop down to Frensham Road. Just looking at the floor plan. And sorry. This is the lower ground floor plan. So on the bottom right-hand corner, you can see there's access in there for cars. So that's just for the northernmost dwelling, which has, garaging. So that's below the level of the street. The upper ground floor gives access straight into all 3 houses and then bedroom accommodation above that. Some drawings here showing the outline of the existing building against what is proposed. So red outline showing the profile of the existing building, and showing that the building is higher than what's existing there. But as you can see on the side elevation drawings, most of the height comes from the variations in roof slope. We've paid particular attention to impacts on the building to the north, being the building which would potentially be most affected by the proposal. There was an amended plan submitted which was consulted on quite recently, and that moves the northernmost dwelling slightly to the east, northeast. I think I've said north in the report, but it's actually northeast, and improves the relationship with Austin Place. So at each level, there's 2 flats on the next 2 drawings. In this drawing, the red dots are 2 flats closer to Vicarage Hill, and 25-degree lines just showing the relationship in terms of sunlight, daylight protection. And then the next drawing is very similar, but it shows the 2 flats at ground and first floor level, closer to Frensham Road, and the 25-degree line is not met by the new building. Got a couple of CGIs here. They're both really from positions more or less over Frensham Road. So one from the northwest, and then the other one from the southwest, I should say. There's a good view in that drawing actually of Austin Place, so you can actually see a couple of balconies on there, which are where the red dots on the previous drawings were shown. And some more CGIs. The top ones are of different angles of the front. Context drawing here of the buildings that would appear from Vicarage Hill. It's about 1.2 meters higher than Austin Place. I've, courtesy of Google Street View, some views down Vicarage Hill here, which show, albeit in summertime, that the building would be largely obscured by trees. Obviously in wintertime there'd be somewhat more view there. This is a last drawing of a previously withdrawn application, which the current application seeks to overcome the issues with that. The application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Alistair. We have several speakers, the first of which is David Ingram. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Ingram, from when you start speaking.
That's all right, I'll switch it on for you.
Okay, well, I'm David Ingram. I'm from one of the seven properties, in fact, that share the private lane which runs alongside Bourne Hall onto Vicarage Hill. My comments are supported by these residents and by others living close by, and also by the Bourne Conservation Group, which takes a close interest in the conservation area that runs right along the boundary of the hall. We're not opposed in principle to the replacement of the dilapidated building, but we do continue to have objections which reflect the overdevelopment of the site. Firstly, the Planning Officer's report acknowledges that the road from which it is intended to provide parking and access to this development is a private lane. Surrey Highways have also confirmed that it is not a public highway. It is the only access for these seven properties, and it's the conduit for our public utilities. Bourne Hall has only access to Vicarage Hill. There's no evidence that it has a right of way on the private lane. We understand that rights of way are not matters on which a planning application is assessed, but in this case it's highly relevant because the only way that cars can access the road is onto the private lane. So if Bourne Hall does not have right of way onto the private lane, then the design is fundamentally flawed and can't be built, whether it gets planning permission or not. So it's imperative that there can be no interference with the continuous and unrestricted access for the properties that depend on the private road. The residents will take whatever steps are necessary to protect their access and their interests. A design that does utilise the existing access to Vicarage Hill should be pursued, in our view. Under visual impact, residents and Bourne Conservation do not agree that the proposal conforms with the special character of the Bourne in Farnham. It doesn't respect it, nor is it sympathetic to the architectural surroundings, and there's a significant loss of trees and screening which is not replaced in the new design. Austin Place is substantially screened from Vicarage Hill, so it can hardly be seen, but the proposed building will be taller and will not be screened. And there's no building in the area that is of the same scale and with the same parking arrangements with no screening at all. So as such, we consider this design should be rejected. However, if the scheme is approved, there are a number of conditions that we would want to make sure are robust. First of all, special conditions must apply to ensure the uninterrupted access to the private lane for existing residents, and that must include responsibility for the public utilities that lie underneath it. Secondly, on ecology and biodiversity, it's now acknowledged that a lot of mature trees were taken down prior to the application, and we think that the biodiversity net gain loss calculations must be baselined on that original status. Third, on waste storage and collection, and in fact one of your pictures shows that the 7 houses, or 6 of the 7 houses, use the lane to park their wheelie bins and other waste receptacles, and the effect of the design will be to simultaneously eliminate the current off-road waste storage and collection point that we currently have. So there must be a condition that acceptable, safe, alternate waste storage and collection facilities are provided by the developer for these homes. So to summarise, the property should be developed, but not as currently planned. The application faces access issues and is out of character and should be refused in its present form. But if approved, then conditions relating to access, biodiversity, waste management must fully protect the 7 existing properties using the lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. The next speaker is Mr. Miller. You two have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, members. My name is Howard Miller, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant Pauline and Gary Branch to speak in support of the application for the erection of 3 dwellings following the demolition of the existing dance studio at Bourne Hall. The application is a resubmission of 4 houses scheme submitted in October 2023 and withdrawn in March of last year. The application was withdrawn in order to address the concerns of your officers. This application was also preceded by a pre-application inquiry in which a 3-house development was supported by your officers. In addition, there are permitted development rights for the conversion of the existing commercial building into 3 dwellings, and as such, the officers' report states the principle of the change of use to residential has already been established. This is a fallback position which is highly relevant in this case. Since March last year, when the 4-unit scheme was withdrawn, a considerable amount of work has been undertaken between the planning consultants and the planning officers in order to address concerns that were raised. This has included numerous alterations to the scale and design of the new houses to ensure that the development minimises any impact on the neighbouring properties, the adjacent highway and the surrounding area. Accordingly, your officers are now recommending permission be granted. It is important to note that the development would help contribute to the growing housing need in the borough in this sustainable location within Farnham. In addition, the scheme has been designed to comply with Building Regs M4 for accessible and adaptable dwellings, as far as is permitted by the site topography, in order to be viable for use both for older residents and those with disabilities. The proposed development would be an attractive addition to the area, made to match the prevailing character of the street scene by way of the height, roof type, which would match that similar to Austin Place next door. The new houses will appear as modest 2-storey dwellings from the front. However, they will include a lower ground floor level with access at the rear of the garden. They will also provide ample internal space, which would far exceed the minimum space standard requirements. The topography of the site has been challenging, but the architect has managed to provide a scheme which is both attractive and makes the best use of the site. The houses are all provided with off-road car parking spaces. In addition, the development will meet the Waverley's parking and amenity standards. In addition, sufficient separation distance is achieved to ensure no impact on the neighbours. Overall, the appearance of the site will be greatly improved with the existing vacant dance studio, which is rather dated design and is not in keeping with the area of Vicarage Lane. There will be no impact on the neighbouring Old Church Lane conservation area. Objections related to the highways appear to be relatively mostly to issues with people parking along Vicarage Lane. Ample parking has been provided for this site. There's been no objections raised by Surrey Highways, who have merely recommended conditions to be attached. In all these respects, the development is fully compliant with both local and national policy and is supported by your planning officers. And as such, we hope that this meeting will approve the application and grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next, we have the ward councillors, starting with Councillor George Murray, please. You too have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for enabling me to speak. Farnham Town Council have looked at this application on a number of occasions very carefully, and also at the previous application, and noted the reduction from 4 to 3 dwellings on this restrictive site situated over a narrow lane adjoining the Old Church Lane conservation area. We ask that conditions must include a construction management plan. and, and to ensure safe access and construction in this sensitive location, and also a landscaping plan maintained for a minimum of 5 years to include screening and softening of the exposed rear elevations and gardens from Frensham Road. I do note the neighbourhood objections and also from my friends at the Bourne Conservation Group. However, I am pleased to see that these have mostly been addressed by very specific and detailed conditions, with the additions of a new tree protection plan condition and updated condition 3 of the construction management plan to include the adjacent private road. The officer notes that the applicant has worked with the applicant in a positive and proactive way. And I would say that this is evident from the reduction from 4 dwellings to 3, plus the conditions agreed to try to ameliorate the concerns of the neighbours. I do know the site well. It's an incredibly tricky site to build on. And also, I cannot see the hall ever being used for community use in the future. With Waverley Council only having a 1.28 years housing land supply, this application will provide much needed family housing on this Windfill site. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I actually think it's ghastly, but I'm going to recommend that everyone votes for it. Because I think in planning terms, we have no reason not to. Nobody wants the hall. I mean, the hall was never a thing of beauty, even when we used it frequently, before it became the stage school. But this is a terrible place to want to have to build anything. They've got prior approval to divide the hall up into 3, which would have been a disaster in every sense of the word for existing residents and for the future residents. It would just have been so unsuitable. So we were relieved when this came in for at least new housing on that site. Having said that, I don't know how much of you picked up of the picture of the Lich Gate, which was a lynch gate, I noticed on one plan, but anyway, it's a Lich Gate, I do assure you. And as you come round there are always cars parked. It is the most awful, very narrow lane, always a line of cars. And it sort of vaguely works because everyone who lives there knows how they have to drive. It's easier at night when you can see lights coming around, but it is a blind bend, and it's a blind bend with a queue of traffic all the way along. So although I, as I say, don't like the design, and I am worried about the screening, we couldn't see the back of the hall for years. It was just covered by greenery. Austin Place is down on the 287. It's not up on Vicarage Hill. So that space was all just green, and then suddenly it all went. And I do agree that if we are doing a biodiversity net gain, we should start from where we had it, not now, because they have ripped everything up. Nature is taking its course, and I saw some laurels have been planted. But, you know, we are going to have to put strict conditions on this. Otherwise, we are going to be faced with that block of built form that we have never had in quite that way before. And certainly the question of this private lane is an issue because, you know, there is no access onto it from the hall at the moment. And, you know, the one thing we do want, if we give permission, is for the thing to go ahead. So I do hope that we can actually make sure that, you know, that is something that can be sorted, that private entrance, because it's vital to the success of this this application. So to cut a long story short, because of the planning history, because of the prior approval, I don't think we have any grounds whatsoever to turn this down. Having said that, building it's going to be awful. And in addition to what the speaker said about their access for waste and their current situation where they can bring the bins up and get the bins emptied, all of that must be worked out with the local residents, as must the parking with the Ridgeway School. When we did the revised parking in Great Austins, we deliberately left part of Vicarage Hill for the helpers at the Ridgeway School. So they must be included in any discussion, because otherwise you are going to have all these people who regularly park there and the construction vehicles and any visitors to the site who can't actually use one of the parking spaces. So it is going to be a nightmare while it's built. We hope it works after it's built, but it is not going to be easy on that road. And as I say, at the moment, there's an arrangement with the Ridgeway School. The residents that park along that know the state of the road, but anybody coming around that bend without realising what they're coming around to, well, they either hit the car or get up on the pavement and hit the fence. You've no choice. So I support it up to a point, but I don't like it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, members, Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. Can I have a view from the officers about this private lane? I mean, it's been mentioned quite a bit as to being part of the application, although we've got to be careful looking at it from a planning perspective. But obviously, if there is no other access, if this forms part of it, then it may colour our view. So could I have an officer's view on that private lane?
So the private lane is the access. I think one of the speakers, actually, objectors, confirmed that, it's a private matter. It's been put forward as a means of access. So that is what is in front of you this evening to determine the application on. Alistair, maybe if you just get up the red line and that shows the access, just so that we can confirm that to members.
Madam Chairman, could I just say that we can't really hear terribly well, especially in the public gallery. And again, it's the machines and people not speaking into the mic. So if we could just ask the front row, the important people, to get close to a mic, please.
Okay, so we brought up the location plan, the site plan. The red line plan. The red line indicates the area of the site. So, and then the blue line indicates the edge of the lane. So they are including the front, the end of the lane adjacent to the hall within the application site for the purposes of access, as you say. At the access or legality of the access is a matter for the applicant to ascertain and ensure that is in place. However, we have had very recent title searches which actually show that land isn't registered. So all the land around about it is registered as under a private owner, but that particular piece of land isn't registered. So haven't been able to locate any evidence so far that it is under the sole rights of the occupiers to the south, who currently use that as their main access or sole access.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. Having just heard that that lane is obviously not in ownership to anybody, and if the developers' lorries are going up and down that particular lane, it's going to completely block it for the residents getting back and forth to their homes. Just an observation.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you. Yeah, just on the conditions, I suppose. Where is the condition, the relevant condition in respect of while the work's undergoing, enabling other residents to access freely the lane? Is there one? I'm just looking through them all. I'm trying to.
Yeah, condition 3 is the key condition there. So that's a fairly static condition in itself, requiring submission and approval of a construction transport management plan. That's on the main agenda, and it's also been amended in the update sheet. The particular part that's been amended is in relation to condition surveys before and after, with a commitment to fund repair of any damage. In the main agenda, it just refers to the highway, but in the update, it refers to the highway and the private lane. I don't think there would be any, well, there should be no suggestion that construction traffic would need to use anything other than the area within the red line in order to access. And then, as I totally agree, obviously access has to be maintained for residents during the construction period. If members consider that that condition doesn't contain enough clauses to provide for that, then there would be the option of just perhaps including an additional clause to ascertain that that's provided for in the condition.
Councillor Gale next, and then Councillor Spence, and then Jackie, you want to speak again?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just get confused over these things, how people can put a red line around something that they don't own, they don't have permission to use. So if the road isn't owned by anybody, anybody can use that to build off of the side of it and have it as part of their development, is that right?
So members, just to be clear on this point, the application has put forward this as a means of access. If they are not legally able to then secure that access, then they would not be able to implement the permission. But for the purposes of this evening, you have to consider it on the basis that that's what's been offered, and therefore you need to make a decision whether or not that is an access that's acceptable and that's a scheme that's acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Spence.
Yes, I would like to pick up on the previous point about that condition 3 and propose that an additional clause is inserted to include details of access for the residents down that lane.
So members, just to advise on that point, I think we need to be really, really clear on what we can and can't achieve by a condition. So the access road is the access road. We're suggesting a access construction and environment management plan to ensure that there isn't any that deliveries occur at appropriate times, that there's space on site to unload, and that we minimise the impact of construction vehicles. And bearing in mind that, you know, construction vehicles won't be coming every single day. There will be, I'm sure, at various stages, probably a concrete mixer that will come up and dump some concrete in the foundations, and then a bit later there'll be probably a single or two deliveries of bricks, and then at some point windows and roof tiles. So there'll probably be 4 or 5 deliveries of materials. So, you know, members, I'm sure you're all aware that there won't be bricks being delivered every single day or windows delivered every day. There will be a number of events that will lead the materials. So we're not able to as a planning authority, we can put an enforceable condition on that says you submit a construction management plan, you tell us when the deliveries are going to happen, and you minimise the impact. I'm not sure in my mind how we can frame an enforceable condition that meets the legal tests that are required to be met by any planning condition we impose relating to residents' access and parking. So we can control the controllables, as in we control vehicles coming to and from this site, but I don't think we can control what the existing residents do in that road. We can ensure that there is minimised impact from the construction resulting from traffic coming from and to the site, but we can't remove any traffic visiting that site for the purposes of construction.
Councillor Spence.
Okay, thank you. I understand that. So effectively, you're saying that condition as drafted should give you enough leeway when you're reviewing it to basically ensure that the accessibilities broadly of the residents are maintained.
That is the advice I'm giving the planning committee this evening, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keane and Councillor Gay, you want to come back?
I think Councillor Spence's question answered most of what I was going to ask. I just am concerned, and it's been pointed out that we can't have a say on this, but I am concerned about residents not being able to park in the road that they live in because of personnel parking on there. But you've just pointed out that we can't say anything on that, although we might not like it.
Councillor Gale.
Just one point on condition 3, where it lists all the things for parking of vehicles of site personnel, operatives, visitors. Is that on site? Do we specify that this parking and everything must be on site? Because we've had something similar in my village where people were supposed to be on site, but the vehicles were all over the village. So do you specify that at all in the condition?
So members, we can control what happens on site. We cannot stop or prevent vehicles parking on the public highway. That goes beyond the remit of any planning condition, and indeed beyond the remit of even the highway authority if they are parking on the highway legally.
Are there any other speakers? No. So we have a councillor who'd like to sum up. Questions and debate. Yes, Councillor Austin.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was just a comment that I would agree that the design is not to my taste, and clearly the owner of the land has got some work to do on access arrangements, but I don't. I've just seen, actually, I've clocked the updated conditions, and I'm glad to see that one about the tree protection statement as well there. So I just wanted to say that I can't see that there is a planning reason that we would reject this application, even though the design is not to my taste. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? No. Councillor Murray, Councillor Coburn, would you like to sum up?
Yes, I'll try and sum up briefly because, you know, I'll be told that it's something we can't deal with. But this road is impossible. And I mean that because during the day, it is constantly parked on one line. Now, that will apply whether it's a cement mix or anything else coming. And very often, the only gap will be, and you've taken the picture off of the bill, very often the only gap will be across this lane. That will be the only place that a vehicle will be able to pull in. Now, if you're going to tell me that we can't put a condition in that protects that, because we're talking a road where there is literally no parking space. I mean, either we take out all the parking that we've worked hard to preserve for the Ridgeway School and for other users, the church, or, you know, we are going to have this enormous problem. It's just one of those things, and it is something that's got to be worked out ahead of. A simple management plan isn't going to do it. You know, that's bad enough when you've just got a difficult road, but this is a difficult road with permanent parking spaces right up to the junction, and the junction goes right back on itself, a hairpin, and down the hill. So we've got all the sort of topography as well. It is a very, very difficult one, and I don't know how we do it, but we have got to protect that the entrance, however we can phrase it, to that to those 7 properties, because otherwise, what's going to happen if they're there and an ambulance can't get down? All the usual sort of problems that people might have, and you know, we have to make sure that what we're saying is strong enough to protect the amenities of those people down that lane. I don't know how we say it, but we've got to find some words to do it.
Okay, members, I absolutely understand the point you're making, but obviously I can't advise you to put conditions on that then aren't enforceable, and then we end up sort of making promises that we then can't deliver on. So that I can't advise you. I hear what the problem is. I'm not sure how we can deal with that through a condition. But members, what I suggest we do is we put an informative on that the, unless Councillor Murray is going to come up with a better idea, which I suspect he's about to, but just bear with me for a moment, that we actually either put an informative on, or you delegate approval subject to us meeting with the applicant and seeing what other measures can be put in place with the parties, and if necessary, meet with, you know, all the parties involved in this to see what we can resolve. We still couldn't put a condition on, but at least it would facilitate that conversation and actually see what we can seek to achieve through negotiation with the relevant parties.
Councillor Murray.
Madam Chairman, looking at the supplementary of condition 3, which came out yesterday, it added the private lane to the conditions. So I understood it to mean that all the conditions of construction management would include the private lane. So you can't block it, you can't block the access to it. And that's what it said in the conditions. So it included the private lane. Now, I understand there's a legal discussion about who has access to this private lane, but the condition added the private lane to it, and it was clear that what it was. So that gave me comfort that there wouldn't be any blockage of the access. To do with the parking, I absolutely agree with Carol that you know, it is the Ridgeway School Park. They all park along that little road, and it is really bad. But then in non-term time, in holiday time, and next week, there won't be any cars there. So I think it's also incumbent on the developer to try and do the big construction work in those holiday times. That would solve the big issue of those times, and try not to have lots of construction vehicles during term time. That might be a help. Thank you.
So, sorry, yeah, and I think that's, you know, it's the construction vehicles that are going to cause the problem, isn't it? So we've got obviously the timing, but what we could do, and it's really difficult because obviously we're tasked to deliver development. And then if we tell someone they can't build for whatever, they can only build between certain windows of time. But I think go back to the point that the construction, the delivery lorries are only going to, there's only going to be 5 or 6 or 7 of them. So we could add then to this condition, maybe as L, that we agree the periods where construction takes place. So that would then ensure that we could work with the developer to try and agree those delivery times, it's school holidays, inset days, or even if it was a Saturday morning delivery, whatever that is. But that would actually give, it would give a control that would be enforceable to the council and would at least address that issue relating to schools.
Thank you, Claire. So with that addition, everybody, we have a recommendation that this be granted. When the lights show, please vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is 12 in favour, no abstentions and none against. So it's carried.
Thank you very much. So that is carried, and we move on to the second application, which is, wait a minute while we swap offices. Okay, so our second application this evening is WA 2024-00350, Lower Berkeley, Grayswood Road, Grayswood, an application under section 73 to vary condition 1 of an already existing permission. Dana.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. So application WA 2024-00350. It's an application under section 73 to vary condition 1, approved plans of WA 20. Oh,
Looking to heaven.
limited.
Apologies, members, just a slight technical hiccup.
Share screen. And then we can just share across there. There we are. So you can take that off now. Apologies. Application under section 73 to vary condition 1 approved plans of planning permission WA 2020-0103 to allow for reduction in the development on the main dwelling house and minor alterations to the proposed cottages and art studio. Planning permission was granted for the conversion of the barns to residential use to form 2 additional cottages, and work has commenced on site in the summer of 2024. This is the location plan with the application site outlined in red. It's located to the east of Grayswood Road, immediately adjacent to the highway. This is an aerial view, again showing the application site outlined in blue, and a closer one where you can see the main house and the barn and cottages at the end, which form a new shape around a private garden. This garden had since been subdivided to provide separate amenity areas to all 3 residential units on site, as you will see from the photographs. This is the main house with the long barn on the western side, and this is the main house seen from the rear, which is the south, and again seen from the front, which is the north. And these are some pictures of the barns. As you can see, they have got fencing in front of them because they have been subdivided to provide individual amenity areas for the new cottages and for the main house. The next slides are going to show the actual amendments. So this is what was approved under the 2020 application, and this is what is now proposed. So the second floor has been removed. The gable on the north elevation has been lowered, and this extension to the roof has been completely omitted. You can see more clear from the south elevation, so the rear elevation. The approved application had the second floor with 3 large dormer windows. That's been completely removed, so no habitable accommodation in the roof and no dormer windows. The next slide shows the approved fenestration to the cottages and the proposed fenestration. There's no other alterations proposed to the size of the dwelling. The dormers have been slightly enlarged, and there's also some alterations to fenestration at the ground floor level. So some windows were converted to doors, and the shape of the windows has been slightly altered. The next slide shows the western side, so it shows the house and the barn and the cottages at the end. Again, this only involves alterations to fenestration. There are 4 more windows added in the roof slope, those 3 and 1 at ground floor level on the western elevation. Again, absolutely no other alterations at all. The officer recommendation is to grant permission subject to condition, and the application has been brought to the planning committee as the planning agent who has submitted the application is now employed by the council. Therefore, it can be done under delegated decision. The matters for consideration were the impact on the greenbelt, design, and impact on visual amenity, impact on the landscape character, residential amenity, standard of accommodation, highways, parking, biodiversity, and the SPA, which are all found to be acceptable. So just to sum up, this application is a reduction in the habitable floor area, which now brings the total increase to just 26.3%, which is significantly under the 40%, which is the recommended maximum increase in floor space. So it's in effect an improvement on the approved scheme. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Because this boundaries or borders 2 wards, there could be up to 6 councillors who could speak. 3 of them are in the room. Does anybody wish to speak? No. Are there any speakers on this? No. So we have a recommendation that this be granted. When the lights show, please vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's 10 in favour, none against and no abstentions, so it's carried.
Thank you very much. So move on to our 3rd application this evening, WA 2024-02383, The Lodge at Church Lane in Whitley. This is an erection of a single-storey extension and a canopy porch. Dana, back to you. Just taking a little break for technical issues, okay, everybody?
Thank you, Madam Chairs, and apologies, everyone. The next application, it's WA 2024-02383, The Lodge, Church Lane, Whitley, Godalming, and its erection of a single-story extension, including open canopy porch and alterations to elevation with associated works. There is an update sheet for this application. I think it's been circulated, but just to ensure everyone knows about it, it's an amendment to the officer report. The proposal description in section 3 states that the extensions will comprise a 1.77 m times 257 m open canopy front porch. These were in fact the proposed dimensions in the previously refused application. In the current application, it reads 1.5 meters times 2.57, so it's a 27 centimeter reduction in the open canopy front porch. This error does not alter any of the analyses as the dimensions are stated correctly elsewhere in the report. Thank you. So the first slide shows the location of the site outlined in red. It is at the south of the village of Whitley, and the site lies in the conservation area of Whitley and within Greenbelt. The second slide shows an aerial view of the site where the arrow indicates it here. And the next one shows the existing and the proposed block plan. So you can see the existing dwelling on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is the proposed dwelling with the two arrows pointing to the side extension and the front porch. The next slide shows the floor plans. So this is the existing ground floor plan, and this is the proposed ground floor plan. So the proposed side extension will be built on an existing patio area, and the front porch, it's here at the front of the house. We've got existing and proposed elevation showing the proposed extension from various views. So from the front, from the side, and as well as the porch. And these are some close-ups of the existing front elevation with the porch in the middle and the extension to the side. And this is the extension seen from the side. Some photographs of the existing dwelling. This is the front of the dwelling, so the porch would be above the front door. And this is the side of the dwelling with the patio where the proposed extension is planned to be. Some more photographs show the dwelling as seen from the road, so from the street scene. It's got quite a low picket fence. And the next one shows a similar one as seen from the street scene, and the public right-of-way footpath that runs alongside the western boundary. And there's another slide to show some aerial views of the cottage from back in 1999, when it was the gate cottage to this larger property, and then how it's been extended following an application in 2003, has been extended quite significantly. Those extension amounting to 44.3% above the original floor space. This table shows the original floor space of the dwelling, which was 94.3 square meters. Existing dwelling at the moment, following the extensions approved under application 2003-2248, that amounted to 44.3. And with the current proposal, it will amount to 158.7%, square meters, which results in 68.3% of additional floor space above the original dwelling. Policy DM14 of the local plan part 2 indicates that extensions and alterations to buildings in the green belt should not be disproportionate to the original building. For residential development, the original building means the building as it existed on the 31st of December 1968, or if constructed afterwards as it was built originally. Oh, excuse me. So outside the settlement boundary, extension, which would include the floor space, by 40% or more over that of the original building will normally be considered disproportionate. So this, with the current extension, that will result in 68.3%. So in other words, if all this proposal would come together, it would have been not acceptable. The fact it was not proportional. At the moment, what might appear a small extension and an actual front page, they are built on top of existing extensions. That's why officers recommended refusal to this proposal, as it represents inappropriate development in Greenbelt and no very special circumstances have been indicated, which clearly outweigh the weight. Therefore, it fails to agree with policies, and this application has been referred to the Planning Committee as there are more than 10 letters of representation with a view contrary to the officer recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We have speakers. We have Samantha Brett. You have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Hello everyone, dear Chair and committee members. My name is Samantha Brett and thank you for allowing me to speak today regarding our planning application. My husband and I both have a keen appreciation for preserving the Greenbelt, and we believe that the changes we're proposing not only respect but enhance the property in ways that align with both the spirit and the letter of the planning framework. We acknowledge the planning officer's recommendation to refuse is based solely on the fact that this extension takes us over the 40% guidance, and DM14 interprets this as being disproportionate and detrimental to the Greenbelt. However, we feel that this is not a fair reflection on the proposal and its particular circumstances. The Greenbelt policy states, where a building is outside of but visually well related to the settlement boundary, the council will decide on a case-by-case basis whether it is appropriate to apply the percentage guidelines. In this case, it's important to note that the house is located approximately 73 metres from the Whitley settlement boundary. Our driveway is on the boundary. We are part of the Whitley Conservation Zone. The church is clearly visible from our house. This defines us as certainly being visual relatable to the Whitley settlement, and further consideration should be made as to whether the percentage argument really applies in this case. It is also important to note that we have not found any plans with reliable and scaled measurements for the original building. An application for Church Lane House references a rough shape of the lodge, although this is not scaled and there are no exact measurements. This also shows a structure adjacent to the house that may well have been part of the original property, i.e. a laundry or an outdoor toilet. Therefore, the percentage increase in size must be considered to be an estimate based upon assumptions. The house is very secluded and only visible from the private driveway. The proposed extension sits out of sight and is recessed into the natural elevation behind a close board fence, meaning it will only be barely visible from the public footpath. The report incorrectly states that we are no longer planning to demolish the remains of a sizable 41-metre square garden outbuilding, which was present in our previous application. We still intend to do this as part of this project, opening a large area of the garden to allow space for flower and vegetable beds. We've also already demolished a 12-metre squared outbuilding, thereby contributing a total of 53 metres squared back to the openness of the Greenbelt and offsetting the proposed extension. We're not looking to build a luxury addition or to profit from development. The current house has a footprint of 68.3 metres squared. The requested extension would increase it by only 15.9 metres squared, not 18.9 metres squared as the report suggests, as part of the extension will be situated under an existing overhang. Considering that we sit within a quarter-acre plot, this addition is not excessive. We have garnered overwhelming local backing with 13 letters of support, including 2 from our local ward councillors. There have been no objections at all, including from the Parish Council, Highways and the Council Conservation Officer, who has actually deemed the extension as preserving and enhancing the character of the conservation area. Surrey Hills National Landscape also concludes positively as the extension would be small in scale, subordinate to the existing dwelling and acceptable in bulk and massing. It would be sympathetic to the rural character of the property and its surroundings. I therefore ask you to consider the bigger picture and address concerns from the officer's report that there are no special circumstances that should allow this development. This is not just about a family seeking to expand, but about a broader commitment to our community and to the environment. The space we're looking to extend into is currently laid to patio, which serves no significant purpose. This proposal will not involve damage to any of the existing trees and vegetation that screen it. The overall proposal has a very low impact and seeks nothing but a positive enhancement to the property, its surroundings and a young family. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sullivan, you wish to speak.
I do indeed, thank you. Members, I am speaking in support of this application. As one of the local councillors for the area, I have listened to the views of several residents and carefully considered the merits of this application against the wider local context, as well as the national planning policy. I acknowledge that as councillors on the planning committee, we can only look at the application in front of us with a planning lens. But as with all cases, we must also have sound judgment. This application in the village, with 13 letters of support, is for a single story extension, acceptable in terms of impact on heritage assets, visual and residential amenities and other matters, but what obviously officers call inappropriate development on the Greenbelt. As you are aware, local planning policy places great importance on preserving the openness of the Greenbelt. However, this property is located on a generous garden plot, and the proposed development will not encroach upon any valuable green space. Furthermore, having spoken to the applicants, I'm encouraged by the intention to restore their garden, as well as already having demolished an outbuilding, thereby, as already mentioned, contributing a total of 53 metres squared back to the openness of the existing plot. The proposed extension itself would be small in scale, in my opinion, subordinate to the existing dwelling, and acceptable in bulk and massing. In my opinion, again, the design of the proposed extension and porch would be sympathetic to our lovely rural surroundings. In a world where we're told of changes to the NPPF, the creation of the grey belt and the future sacrifice of green belt to meet Waverley's housing targets, I find it so hard to believe that we would refuse this reasonable application. I would like to highlight that the proposed extension has also received no objections, as already mentioned, from the Whitley Conservation Zone Rep, Surrey Highways and Whitley and Milford Parish Council, which is a significant consideration given the importance of maintaining the character of our area. Again, the extension has been designed in a way that is well hidden from public view and I think will blend seamlessly to the existing property. Although considered proportionate, both neighbouring properties have also benefited from recent extensions which are in excess of the total footprint of the applicant's property. This property is secluded and the proposed elevations will barely be visible from the public realm. I also think it's pertinent to note that this application will enable a growing family who have lived in the local area for 15 years to stay. Having visited the property, built around in the 1920s, it's obvious that its original purpose was to only fit 2 to 3 people, but the 18th century economy is not today's economy. The cost of this house is well above the national average, synonymous with our area in Whitley, and I think it's unfair that the owners could simply go and buy a bigger home and yet remain here. Like many places in Waverley, our patch is a special one, full of beautiful villages, close-knit communities and compassionate friendships. Perfect for a family to raise their children, but it comes at a markup. If one is lucky enough to own a home, with stamp duty and high interest rates, one simply cannot afford just to move, and certainly cannot afford to move up the ladder when your family grows. We must make do with what we have, and I believe this application is a reasonable example of a responsible extension. This is not a large development, not even a 2-storey development. This is not a money grab trying to squeeze several homes on one small plot. This is a modestly sized extension with a low impact on the surrounding area in real terms and will mean the honest difference between a local family staying close to their community or having to move much further away for an affordable house at great cost. I trust the Planning Committee have understood my arguments and I strongly urge you to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Gale, you wish to speak as ward councillor as well?
Yes, please.
Yes, certainly.
I find it quite difficult to comment on the lodge. As we know, the parish council didn't object on either of the applications that came through, but we should be mindful that the application site is in an area with genuine planning restrictions. But then again, what isn't in Whitley? I can see that a young family want to stay here and bring their children up in the community where they can enjoy the Surrey Hills and the outdoor life. And I would vote to grant if I were able to. However, I do appreciate that the extension, only small, but together with what was first put on there, is well over 60%. And I hope my colleagues on the committee here will look at this favourably for the people because it is very small and there are difficulties in our village. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gale. Councillor Weldon.
Thank you. First of all, I would completely endorse the statements of the two ward councillors. There are no objections from the parish council, and in fact, there are letters of support from local residents. The only point I would make that is different, or to add to what has already been said, I'm really interested that the plans include what is described as provision for an elderly parent's bedroom. One of the points made in a presentation we saw recently in the local plan working group was the forecasts for the population growth specifically state that the elderly population is expected to grow at a greater rate than the population as a whole. And elderly people in general are going to need special provision. We need to make we need to be particularly aware of the need for housing for elderly people. And one of the best ways to do that, where it is possible, is precisely in a family home. So I am completely in support of this application. Thank you.
Members, can I just step in at that point and actually just advise you on what you need to focus on? The planning application relates to an extension of an existing dwelling and how the occupants of that dwelling choose to use the rooms within that dwelling is entirely at that discretion, their discretion. So they could use all the rooms in the house as dining rooms or bedrooms or whatever. So the fact that one of the rooms within the existing house has been labelled an elderly person's or bedroom isn't material to your consideration of this application this evening. And it's really important that you don't give weight to the labelling of that room within the existing dwelling. What is material to your consideration is the policy set out in your report around specifically the green belt and the or is that just shoot the planning officer? So members, I'll stop now.
Thank you. I'm not sure who's first, so we'll go alphabetical, shall we? Councillor Austin.
Thanks. I absolutely will always defend Greenbelt and planning policy in respect of planning restrictions. But I think in this case, I see a sympathetically designed small extension, and I think I shall be using what I believe is my common sense. The nearest house is a significant distance away. I don't think it's going to impact on the Greenbelt. I don't think it's going to impact on any neighbours. So I am minded to approve it. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
I'm completely the opposite. I'm glad you went first. You know, I feel very sorry for the applicants, but I've sat on this committee for years and I have tried to be fair to every single person that's come in. Haven't always achieved it, I'm sure. And I've always sought to protect the green belt. And when I look back and think of the number of people that have come in for similar applications and we have turned them down because of the openness of the green belt, I have to say, what does it say now if we say, ooh, well, you know, we have these policies, but I think in this case, we'll just, you know, let's just lay aside the policy and concentrate on I don't know what. And, you know, it's not going to be good in the long run for anybody if they don't know that we as a committee are looking at all our policies and every application coldly, if you like, but certainly dispassionately, objectively. And the officers have spelt out why this breaks policy, why this is not acceptable in the green belt, why they haven't proved any special circumstances. And, you know, as I say, I'd like £1 for everyone we have turned down in the past, no smaller, bigger than this, because it was in the green belt. And we either have our green belt policies, which we protect to the hilt, or we don't. But we have to be fair to everybody that comes in with an application in that designation. So I'm sorry, because I can see merits in this application, but in order to be fair and dispassionate and objective, I think I have to support the officer tonight, who made it very, very clear this is contrary to policy. Thank you.
Thank you. May I just ask, if this were to be approved, would it change the precedent, set a precedent?
So members, if you are minded to approve it, firstly, you will need to identify the reason why you are departing from your own policy, and that needs to be recorded as a minute to the meeting. That is the rationale behind your decision. And unfortunately, common sense isn't a reason to depart from policy. So members, just to set that into a context, so you can begin to think about how you might do that. In terms of, does it set a precedent? Well, it goes without saying that this is a unique building. So in some ways you wouldn't say, well, then the next door house can do it. But it does set a precedent in departing from your own policy and accepting a larger extension contrary to the objectives of the Greenbelt objectives. So sort of yes and no, but probably more on the yes.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. I was inclined to support the what the local members were saying, actually. In fact, this is opposite from what normally happens at the Planning Commission. We're normally looking at things what the officers are recommending something should be granted, and the committee from time to time overrules that and refuses an application. This is the other way around. But I think the person that's actually convinced me the way I should vote is Councillor Coburn. I think she's actually right in what she's saying, and I think the Chief Planning Officer, so very, very reluctantly, I would actually vote to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So no other speakers? So it goes back to the ward members, if you'd like to sum up.
I don't have much further to add, and obviously, unlike Councillor Coburn, I cannot speak to all previous applications on the Greenbelt. And obviously, as Claire has alluded to, every application is its own and every house is individual. I would have hoped that every councillor has been, or at least is aware of what the actual property looks like in the vista of Whitley. For Maxine and I are ward councillors, so we're there quite a lot. We go to the church quite a lot, and we're in the area. So I understand that, as you've said, common sense isn't the reason to part from policy, and that is a real shame, because I think if we were to all look at this application as an individual application with the context of the wider area, then I think it's fairly obvious that this is reasonable. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. Councillor Gale.
Yes, just quickly to say, I think it's a shame that it's a small extension, but I do appreciate what the officers are saying. And yes, we do have to preserve our green belt and the conservation areas and all those sort of things. If it tugs on your heartstrings, you would permit it, but that's not a planning position to be in. So I think it's a difficult one. Thank you.
Thank you. So no other speakers. Now, when it comes to the vote, though, of course, refusal is negative, but you're voting in favour of refusal. That's the recommendation. So when lights show, please vote. If you support the recommendation. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is 7 in favour of refusal, 4 against and no abstentions. So therefore the recommendation is carried.
Thank you very much. And now we come to trees, everybody. Thank you very much, Dana. The officer who would be presenting this fell down the stairs yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Yes. Taking out his rubbish. So instead of Theo, we have Jack presenting both the applications for? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the application is TPO 2024, trees on land east of Midhurst Road, Hazelmere.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, thank you. And yes, apologies for my not presenting in person, but you have heard I've had a small misadventure which has affected my mobility. I am here to present a tree preservation order to the committee where the committee needs to decide whether it should be confirmed or not. The tree preservation order is number 2024 and it relates to trees on land east of Midhurst Road, north of Five Gates Cottage in Hazelmere. And please be aware that the trees are a material consideration in a planning inquiry at the Scotland Park inquiry. Next slide, please, Jack. Okay, so as a letter of objection has been received to the TPO during its consultation period, and in accordance with the Council's constitution, the decision of whether to confirm the order is referred to the Planning Committee. So the officer recommendation is that the TPO should be confirmed with modification by the exclusion of one tree. The current order was made on the 17th of September 2024, and it relates to 6 individual trees and 3 groups of trees to consist a total of 20 trees. The plans on the right show the tree location, and you can also see an aerial view there showing the canopy cover. Yeah, oh, sorry. Yes, thank you, Jack. Next slide, please. I'm not used to this. There we go. So you can see the tree location plan and also an aerial view there. Next slide, please, Jack. So during the provisional period, so the current order was made following the expiry of a previous order affecting the same trees and the same land. During the provisional period of the previous TPO, a review was carried out where officers recommended that a new TPO be made, and that was in the interests to improve accuracy and with closer assessment of the tree condition and amenity value. Yep, so next slide, please. Some further background. Since the making of the current order, T2 Beech of the TPO, which is an individually specified tree, has been removed by the Highways Authority as they have deemed it, along with another non-protected beech tree, to be in a dangerous condition and presenting a risk to the highway. So T2 Beech has been removed in accordance with Regulation 14 of the Tree Preservation Regulations. And in particular, that relates to comply with another Act of Parliament, to comply with an Act of Parliament, and that being Section 41 of the Highways Act 1980. So accordingly, the current order should be modified to exclude the tree that has been felled. Next slide, please. So the site is subject, or the land is subject to a planning application for a major development of 112 houses. The trees flanking Midhurst Road, the one subject of the order, are a material consideration in a planning inquiry, which is due to take place. The proposal would, should it be approved, approximately 10 of the mature trees along Midhurst Road, along with its understory component, would be removed to facilitate access to the development. Next slide, please, Jack. So here we can see another location of the trees, and the proposed access is identified there, and the trees which would be affected by that. And this has been submitted as part of the development plans to support the proposal. Next slide, please, Jack. And here we can see that the proposed access to the site, which would require a new filter lane to be built into the highway, along with 90-meter visibility splays either side of the access, and that is to accord with highway standards. Next slide, please. So this image shows an oblique aerial view of the site. It's approximately looking southeast and shows the wider treescape of the area. The route of Midhurst Road is presented by the red line, and the trees subject of that of the order are towards the right-hand side of the red line, if that makes any sense. But we get an impression here of the landscape and how the importance of trees within that landscape. Next slide, please, Jack. This is a photo taken from the field to the east of Midhurst Road, and it is, you can see the protected tree line on the right-hand side of the image. The tallest tree in the center there, towards the background in the center of the image, is T3 Douglas fir, and that's an individual tree of the order. Next slide, please, Jack. So here we've got some Google Street View captures. The first image is looking, or the left-hand photo is looking northeast along Midhurst Road, and the protected trees are to the right of this image. T1 is the second tree in on the right-hand side of the image. So that's T1 of the order. And then the right-hand image is looking southwest along Midhurst Road, and it shows the protected trees to the left of the image. Next slide, please. So the one objection has been received to making of the order, or to confirmation of the order, and that has been submitted on behalf of the appellant in the planning appeal. Broadly, their objection relates to trees being of poor condition, the use of tree groups being inaccurate and ambiguous, the expediency of the order not being demonstrated because the trees are largely not under their control. And additionally, they've raised procedural concerns relating to contents of an officer's report when recommending the TPO. Next slide, please, Jack. So in the officer's response, officers have explained that the trees of outwardly poor condition were not included in the current order. And where information has since become available to demonstrate poor tree condition, the tree has been dealt with under exceptions within tree preservation regulations. The expediency of the order is demonstrated by the clear adverse impact to visual amenity of the area should the trees be felled. And then with regard to the raised procedural concerns, there are no implications to the legitimacy of the current order. So next slide, please, Jack. So the planning consideration relating to TPOs and whether they should be confirmed relates to, well, local planning authorities may make a TPO if it appears to them to be expedient in the interests of amenity to make provision of the preservation of trees and woodlands in their area. So the main considerations are the amenity value of the trees and the expediency of making the order. So in this case, the trees and their linear arrangement flanking Midhurst Road are considered to be a desirable and significant mature feature in the landscape. and are attributed importance and value by their contribution to the landscape character. The expediency relates to the fact that the trees would be impacted should the development be granted planning permission. And approximately 10 of those trees would be felled, including their understory component, to enable the safe access to the development in accordance with highway standards. The removal of these trees would have a significant impact on the amenity of the area. So next slide, please. In conclusion, the points of objection raised against the confirmation of the order have not been substantiated and do not override the public amenity value presented by the trees and the realistic threats to their long-term retention if the order is not confirmed, subject to the modification. So the recommendation is that the order be confirmed with modification by the exclusion of T2 Beach, because that tree has been felled as previously discussed. Okay, that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Theo. Councillor Weldon, you'd like to speak.
Thank you. I think it's important to bear in mind in this application that, as the presentation has made clear, this is tied up with the fairly controversial application to develop the land alongside it. And that land is A and B land, national landscape. This avenue of trees, and it's a long line all the way up Midhurst Road, really is a very attractive landscape feature. And any harm to those trees is absolutely going to impact the value of that national landscape property. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Rubini, you just picked the post there.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, as a lot of you are aware, I am the county councillor for that area. An officer at Surrey told me that, in fact, one of the trees there, the one that was felled, was in poor condition, and under his authority, it was taken down because of the highway that runs next to it. This, as you've heard from Councillor Weldon, is a very controversial local issue. I arranged several meetings. I spoke to the tree officer here and the one at Surrey to confirm that the one that was taken down correctly and everything was done in the proper manner. As far as I'm concerned, what Councillor Weldon said is absolutely correct. As you see from the photographs, it's a lovely tree line at the side of the road. It obviously stops a lot of noise going out from that main road, and that road is used very, very well. There is a part, the footpath, although you have to go up on the bank, and I walked all along the bank getting soaking wet with grass and goodness knows what else. But isn't that what nature is all about? So as far as I'm concerned, yes, I would confirm that this should be done. I would agree with the officer that this is an important line of trees, and never mind an appeal that had failed in the first place. We must remember this is an appeal, not the original. So as far as I'm concerned, we should confirm this and carry on and put the TPO in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I agree with everything that's been said. You know, I know this area very, very well. I drive that road quite frequently, and it is a lovely line of trees. And if those trees were taken out, it would leave an enormous empty gap, which would be a very ugly sight in that area, because it is literally just trees. And in the summer, you get this beautiful canopy of green, which would be lost. And so I think it's very important that we actually have TPOs on those trees, regardless of any development that is being sought. It's the countryside and the trees that we should be worrying about. So I fully endorse the TPO on these trees. Thank you.
Thank you. No other speakers? So we move to the recommendation, which is that we confirm the modification, with the modification, the TPOs on these trees. All those in favour, or all those ready to vote?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's 12 in favour, no abstentions and no none against, so therefore it's carried.
Thank you. So we come to our second application for a TPO, TPO 2724, trees on land at and adjacent to 46 The Crescent, Farnham. So this is really you, Jack.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. So agenda item 8.2 for you this evening will be tree preservation order number 2724, trees on land at and adjacent to 46 The Crescent, Farnham. So the purpose and summary for this item is to consider the objection to the making of tree preservation order 2724 and to determine whether the order should be confirmed. This order relates to two groups of trees, G1, which consists of 3 beech trees, and G2, which is 8 beech trees and 2 oak trees. So here's a site plan which identifies the TPO. And here's an aerial view. So to the right-hand side there is G1 and to the left is G2. So a bit of background. This site was originally subject to TPO FAR 40, dated February 1966. This was subject to the Council's area review programme, so we systematically go through area orders as is good guidance. The site was subsequently made, trees are subsequently made the subject of TPO 1223, which was made in June 2023 to replace FAR 40. Following the making of the order, the provisional period, no objection was received during the consultation period, therefore the order was confirmed in August 2023. After the consultation period, actually, we received an objection. The objector explained they'd been out of the country and are unable to lodge an objection in the 29-day consultation period. So, subsequent to that, officers attended a meeting with the owners of 46 The Crescent to understand the concerns and reassess the subject trees. It was decided that TPO 1223 was to be revoked and replaced with TPO 2724, which therefore admits 1 individual oak, 1 individual sycamore, as well as 2 sycamore and 2 sweet chestnut trees from G1, which was subject to TPO 1223. These trees were omitted owing to out condition, following a closer assessment of their contribution as part of the groups. So here's photograph 1. You can see G1 to the left of the image and G2 more centrally. This is a Google Street View image from September 2022. Photograph 2 shows the trees from Alma Lane, the public highway, G2 to the left-hand side and G1 side to the right. Photograph 3, this is again additional views of the protected trees from Alma Lane, just slightly left where we just previously were, and it shows the copper beech which has been added within G2. So again, as Theo identified, the amenity value and expediency for planning consideration for the making of TPOs, there are clear views of these trees from Alma Lane and the Crescent, and the trees positively contribute to the attractive sylvan character of the area. In terms of expediency, the removal or excessive pruning of these trees will have a negative impact on the landscape and the amenity of the area. Intention has been expressed to remove or excessively prune at least 1 beech tree, which would have foreseeable detrimental effect on adjacent trees. It is therefore expedient in the interest of public amenity to place a provisional TPO on these cohesive groups. Following the making of Order 2724, we received 6 objections from interested parties, and they're outlined as below. So no leaflet attached to the notification letter. The order needs to specify the exempt works. Public visibility is not sufficient to justify the order. No reason for the order, as the original justification from the 60s has now disappeared. Trees in G2 do not have sufficient prominence to be considered an amenity, and no exceptional circumstances have been presented to justify the order. Beech tree in G1 is a nuisance and requires regular maintenance, which costs money to apply for. Beech tree in G1 causes undue stress to residents, particularly during high wind events, and needs to be removed. The beech tree in G1 is dangerous. So that's an outline of the objections. In response to that, this is the officer's summary. There's been a series of planning applications seeking the permission for development within the area of the TPO. This appears to have prompted the initial TPO control on the site. Officers remain of the view that the trees covered by this order have sufficient public visual amenity to warrant protection. The TPO is not made to hinder good arboricultural management or limit necessary tree safety works. It does, however, allow the local authority an element of control against detrimental tree works. Even if the works are not arboriculturally necessary, they can be approved on the grounds of shading or seasonal debris, just acceptable nuisance, provided that the wider amenity is not significantly reduced. Therefore, we conclude that the objections raised against the confirmation of 2724 are not substantiated and do not override the public visual amenity presented by the trees and the realistic threats to their longer-term retention of the order if not confirmed. The recommendation is that the tree preservation order be confirmed without modification. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. There are 2 ward members here. Do you wish to speak? No. Members, do you have any comments, questions? Councillor Coburn?
Just breaking my glasses in the attempt. Yes, I mean, I have no problem with this TPO. Just in general, I do occasionally have some sympathy for residents when they have enormous trees. And I wonder sometimes whether we don't help them enough in terms of education or help. Because this particular area, it would be dreadful if those trees were lost. There are parts of Farnham where there's so many blooming trees, you wouldn't notice it really. But, this is not one of those areas. And that some of those pictures were lovely because of the trees. But I do accept that if you've got, I can think of one set of elderly bungalows that were sort of blighted, if you like, by a sycamore tree. Drove them all mad. It was a beautiful tree, but I mean, it just dropped its seed all the time and, spoilt their little gardens and everything else. So I do think, that trees and built up areas, we have to really think about it carefully and explain to people that we're not trying to, stop them from doing anything to these trees. We're just trying to protect them so that we can all enjoy the benefits of them. I think perhaps after COVID, we all understand the benefits of trees a little bit more than we did before. But I do have some sympathy for some residents who buy a house with quite a small tree and it turns into a monstrosity. They don't know what to do about it, especially if it's got a TPO. But I think this one, and looking at the pictures again, I thought, the trees were really essential for that scene to remain as attractive as it did. So I have no problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say on behalf of all of you, I'm sure we've not had tree preservation orders in my time, and there've been 2 very good presentations. So thank you both. So we have there are no other speakers. No, we have a recommendation. It is recommended that TPO order number 2724 on land at and adjacent to 46 The Crescent in Farnham be confirmed without modification. Please vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's 11 in favour, none against and no abstentions, so it's carried.
Thank you very much. Before we go, Claire just would like to give us some words about the latest appeal decision.
Yes, so members, at last committee we talked about doing some feedback on appeals. We will be producing more comprehensive reports on all the appeals decisions we receive between committees. But this evening I just wanted to highlight the appeal decision at Farnham Cemetery. So members, you'll recall that the recommendation was brought to you to approve this application. The application was overturned and permission was refused. The appellant or the applicant appealed the decision, and the refusal was subject to a 6-day public inquiry running the week before and shortly after Christmas. The council had to employ counsel and also employed an external planning consultant as a witness. And I just want to share with you the difficulties that we had getting someone to take this case on. We approached around 14 different practices and found someone to take the case on. The council we employed was a sort of mid-cost council. The other side chose a very flamboyant individual that was very flamboyant for the entire time of the inquiry. And I think at one point was competing against a pantomime that was taking place in the adjoining room, but that's fine. The inspector was clearly a very, very thorough inspector. He gave his decision in an extended letter that covered and more than covered every point. The appeal was dismissed and planning permission was allowed. And the conclusion was that, and I'll just read one paragraph, but it is important because it points again to this issue around the policy and identifying the harm. So in his paragraph 152 of his decision letter, he concludes that overall, whilst I have identified limited conflict with policy FNP1 Part D and policy FNP 13 Part A of the neighbourhood plans in terms of loss of trees and hedgerows, including some protected by TPOs, I have found no specific harm arising from proposal in these respects, when taking account of the mitigation secured by condition and the compensation provided in the form of enhanced landscape and biodiversity. So, you know, he's weighing those balances against the limited harm he's identified. Having regard to all the relevant policies, subject to the conditions set out in the attached schedule, the proposal would be in accordance with the development plan as a whole. Furthermore, there would be no unacceptable impact on harm and no conflict with the framework. It follows that the material considerations in this case do not indicate that this appeal should be determined otherwise than in accordance with the development plan. And then he goes on to conclude that he should allow this appeal and grant planning permission subject to the conditions that were agreed between the parties. Members, the overall cost of employing both counsel and the planning witness was over £70,000. The 6-day inquiry and all the preparation work, and there is significant preparation work in the run-in to public inquiries, involved a number of staff, including myself. So there was a significant amount of resource that was used to defend the council's reason for refusal. So members, I'm just sharing that as a learning point, and as is my duty really to share with you the decisions that are made with this planning by this planning committee. So are there any sort of questions that you would like to ask on this one?
Just one question. I haven't had time to read the whole report, the whole judgment. Did we have to pay any of the applicant's costs?
No, so the applicant, we worked really hard to avoid any claims for unreasonable behaviour. So whilst we were slightly adrift on the time scale for the submission of documents, we agreed the statement of the common ground between us, and we behaved reasonably in all respects. So there was no application for cost and no award of costs, and similarly the inspectorate didn't make an application of cost to either party.
There was also no mention on any day of any recklessness on behalf of the councillors. You know, we are here to look at our policy as we see it, and we're here in a different role from the officers. And if we cannot occasionally overturn a decision, even if we're not backed by the inspector, and as I said at the planning meeting, and I will defend this to the hilt, that was the first application on that site that had been supported by any planning officer in this borough, as long as I can remember, 20 odd years. So, you know, I take it that we're being told off, but, oh, come on, Claire, come on. I'm, you know, not that stupid. We're being told off, but I have to say, We are, but I have to say, I'm sorry, but I don't regret it at all. I think we took the right decision for the right reasons at the time. I'm sorry we couldn't defend it better, but you know, we did our best to defend it. We'll have to live with the consequences now, and we'll see, as we often do with inspectors' decisions, whether they were indeed the correct one or not. But we have to wait for that to develop over time. But I think, you know, as a committee here, we've got to stand by our principles, obey our policy, but there are grey areas. And I'm sorry, I think in this particular case, we were right to defend that piece of land that we've defended for 20 years. The fact that the inspector thought that a funeral building with huge parking spaces was perfectly acceptable. He did it very much, if you read the full report, on the need of the Ismaili people. It was their need that dominated, not the need of the local residents or the need of Farnham. It was the need of the Ismailis. And that cemetery is for the Muslims who live in London. You know, it's not for local Muslims at all. And they made no you know, they were perfectly open about this. So, you know, we have it there now. We'll do our best to incorporate it into our town, as we always do, reach out to them. And, you know, we're not going to make life difficult for them just because we oppose the application. But I really do think there are times when we are just going to overturn it. And we should do so if we feel that something is right. And I'm sorry, you know, I'll do what I'm told most of the time. But there are times when I just feel that, you know, my parents got things wrong occasionally. And I think, you know, just occasionally you have to say so.
And members, I'm really not wanting to come over as if I'm telling you off, because my job here is to advise you, and your job is to make the decisions. And yes, we can have constructive conversations with us, but it is my duty to report to, you know, the outcome of your decisions, because that's correct and proper that I do that, and also the financial costs associated with that. So again, that is the correct procedure for planning authorities and the correct relationship between officers and members, not to tell you can't make decisions, but to report to you the outcomes of your decisions, the financial implications of those decisions.
Yes, I think that this has been very helpful in a learning. It is a responsible role that we play. Anybody else want to? Oh, I'm so sorry, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the update. I think that's useful. I just also wanted to say that I would make the same decision again, because I made it based on my planning judgment and the facts before me. And I don't think that any of us should be making decisions on the basis of whether it will be a cost to the council or not. When we're looking at the applications in front of us, they should be on the basis of what we think the planning grounds are. So, thanks.
Yeah, it's not about that. All I wanted to say was, can I remind everybody, if we're still holding it, we've got a post-planning meeting on Monday at 6 p.m. Because we didn't have a very good attendance last time, did we? So could I remind everybody that it's there to be used?
Okay. Can I just apologise? But I got so confused. I mean, the dates kept changing, the days kept changing, the times kept changing, and I had no idea whether or not we were meeting or not. So, you know, I do apologise.
Okay, so Monday, 6 p.m. by Teams or Zoom, one of them. Zoom. See you all there. And until then, good night.